Postmodern art is really complete nihilism. It's strictly conceptual art. No longer about the medium or the art object, but the concept of it. The leftist ego pleasuring itself. It's how offensive and bizarre and unrelatable and alienating can we be in an adolescent rebellion of vulgarity and anti-art, mute in technique and neurotically feminist. They reward mediocrity, and they lower the taste of culture. It's the corporate standard, and it's a canned art that can be reproduced over and over and over. Is the Antichrist of art, the poster child of postmodernism. The art world is run by the elite cultural mafia of so-called progressives. Its Warholian adherents traipsing around at vapid gallery openings, trying to create their 15 minutes of fame. Gallery owners paid off enjoy ego stroking and pandering from the wannabe artists that toe the line of their university professors' platitudes. Nothing could be less inclusive or farther from the spirit of art. History, the literature, they control how we see our own history. White artists must form their own media platforms, their own sales networks, their own cultural venues, never needing to qualify to the art world and its diversity quotas. We can no longer be oblivious to the cultural paradigm that wishes to replace us. And from this context, must be conscious that white art is dissident art, for their activity threatens and destabilizes radical leftist establishments.
Challenging norms, asking uncomfortable questions, revealing hidden parts of society, even fringe or alternative lifestyles. What is the difference between exploration and subversion?
Art in the alt-right has been primarily internet-based. These producers can take their works into real life, either through creating their own art venues or by guerrilla means. Return to the greatness of the West. Reflect your culture and what's going on around you. Our people need it. We need you badly. Welcome again, friends, to Imperium Art. This is episode 12. We are very, very pleased to invite our favorite Australian synthwave artist, SYNTHICIDE, on the show. How are you today, SYNTHICIDE?
Good, thanks. G'day and greetings, guys.
Awesome, awesome. So, and then also I'd like to introduce you to my friend and co-host, Nullus. How are you, Nullus?
I'm doing fine. Hello, SYNTHICIDE, and hello, Donald, and hello to the audience.
So this is a very interesting show today because both Nullus and I have had Nullus's poetry and my guest appearance on the No White Guilt YouTube show. SYNTHICIDE has taken the audio from those and made them into synthwave music. Very, very cool stuff. I would say he is, next to Jurius, probably the top synthwave artist in the Dissident Right, in my opinion, and definitely up and coming and stronger and stronger. The most recent piece that he's put out, I don't know, we don't call it CDs anymore, but what he's got out on Bandcamp is extremely strong, and he's also featuring other people from the White Art Collective. So, SYNTHICIDE, would you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the recent music that you've published?
Yeah, thanks for those kind words. Right, so as far as the SYNTHICIDE project, if you like, that started probably about 2012. It was actually originally a band, a three-piece, four-piece band. I just got tired of playing in bands, just the personality clashes, and like you play in a band, and what usually ends up happening is people's heads go in different directions, and you play one style for so long, you always want to try something else, and that ends up being the end of the band. And I just got sick of the merry-go-round. But I'd always been interested in electronic instruments. I'd been into that since I was a kid, just exposed to it through, whether it was pop music, even avant-garde kind of stuff, through my parents. But so the synth was always there in the background from day one. And once I began collecting gear and learning the soundware, finally, I just sort of hit the nail on the head and went for it. And it just so happened that it's kind of like it was like around that time, around 2010, those early part of the decade, it was kind of like a mass collective consciousness. There was a lot of people that were doing that kind of music all at the same time. And then thanks to social media, suddenly realizing that everyone else was out there. And then, of course, online scenes began forming. Names thrown about: Outrun, Synthwave, Retro Wave, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And and we all can sort of pinpoint. And I know you guys have talked about this film, that I do think it's an important film, still massively to this day. And I'm talking about Drive. It just cemented the style instantly, and it still remained in very much an underground way. I was thinking a lot of that stuff was going to cross over into the mainstream, like even go, at least top 40, but it didn't happen, which surprised me. Instead, we got singing shows and American Idol and all the other crap that we've had put up with last decade.
Right.
But so it's remained in a very underground way, which of course has suited me fine, because that's the way I've operated in, from the hardcore days to, gothics, whatever it was. I've been through every youth movement I can think of.
Nice.
To rave. Obviously, the rave thing got me.
Yeah.
That was the catalyst to get me start buying up electronic instruments and being like a one-man band. And soundtracks, of course. Always being into horror film and John Carpenter soundtracks, you name it, whatever.
For sure. What about your most recent music? Could you talk about that a bit?
Well, the stuff I've done over the last, we'll say, couple of years, or since the Trump, I sort of intentionally started sort of throwing out little signals, obviously to the people that would understand those signals. just little cues that would sort of show what's part of the social and political divide that I might be standing on. Very, subtle,
Yeah.
but gradually more and more so. And they just culminated in the latest release being. I just figured I'd always been wanting to collaborate. It's a very important thing to do, in my opinion. And as many different things as I could think of, obviously from poetry to, other musicians to whatever came up, I was going to try. And
there's so many great people in the White Art Collective to work with too. It's such a fantastic collective.
Yeah, exactly. And that was, once I realized I was sort of surrounded by these people in, all the online groups and whatnot, I thought, okay, I'll just ask. I'm sure, plenty of people are itching to collaborate as much as I am.
And we're lucky to have you too. I mean, SYNTHICIDE does poetry. Of course, I make music as well. But I guess when you contacted me about doing, taking the audio from my interview with No White Guilt and Jared of the Great Order, I was, oh my God, I went through the roof. I thought that would be wicked cool. And so, I was super pleased that you did that, especially because it's about art. The discussion was about art. And exactly. What's the name of that track? We're going to have those linked below. What's the name of that track?
Yeah, that was called The Post-Modernist Always Rings Twice, which is obviously a spin on The Postman Always Rings Twice. And it was also the name of a book written in the 80s, I think. 90s, maybe.
So that was the discussion. And, I was talking about postmodernism. What are your thoughts on postmodernism in the arts?
Well, not. I've seen it all, and it's just when I hear people talking, the discussion was that passionate, like from your side, especially, that I just sort of thought, this would sound great with some dreamy yet sort of powerful music behind it. My thoughts on postmodernism are probably no different to any others. There's the Andy Warhol comment really drove home, because I used to actually kind of be a bit of a fan of that kind of stuff, maybe because of the subversive angle.
Yeah.
But that's when you're younger and sort of trying all these sort of things on.
Just for
as I got older.
Just for the audience, what I said was that Andy Warhol is the Antichrist of art, and I should trademark that or something. But I mean, it's a massive punch in the nose to the modern art world, and it exposes like I said, the vapid shallowness, the pretentiousness of it, how the rewarding of just sort of the fashion, the sense that everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame. It totally guts art. It's as a human institution, that it's all about fashion and how you look and parties and just garbage, total garbage.
Promoters.
The way that you sort of warped my voice in there, and then the pacing of the music that you created, it almost has a sort of an ominous, dangerous flow to it, because it makes my words seem even more revolutionary, I suppose, or dangerous and kind of cutting. So I really commend you on how you did that.
Yeah, you're good. I always, as far as the flow of timing with vocals, that's always super important for me. It's an editing nightmare, but it's super important to do it, because it has to be in lockstep with the beat and the melodies. And like you said, it's got to come across as I think it came across as totally authoritarian in feel, which is what I was going for. And I saturated your voice, and it had it's got some extra depth there, and it's you guys are good talkers, so it's anyone with a good voice that talks passionately, I'm instantly interested in sort of working with that. So
beautiful. So tell us more about the work or the song that you did with Nullus and his poetry, and what inspired you to do that. Maybe some of the technical issues you ran into creating that.
Well, when Nullus came onto the scene, I thought, you were the first poet to come into the White Art Collective, correct, Nullus?
Mm.
Yeah, and so I was paying attention from the get-go, checking out the poetry, and then I think I don't know if I asked or suggested that he, I don't know, but anyway, he started recording them. I thought, okay, here we go. I'm going to instantly knew I was going to find something eventually.
Yeah.
And listening to that particular one, The Vanishing Generation, that was from one of your earlier ones, and it just hit me so hard, like just listening to it, reading the words. Musically, same thing. I just, the flow and the editing, it's lockstep with the music and the melody. I suppose with both of your tracks, there is a bit of a dreamy ambience layer on top, but beneath it is you've got the power coming from the bottom and the ambience on top with the words in the middle. It's just something that I find that works.
So I really hope that we do more in the future. I mean, you and I have talked about doing musical collaborations where I'll write vocals over your music, and so that's coming down the line. Everybody's got jobs and family and this and that, and we squeeze it in as best we can. But I'm very, very excited, and I'm also very jealous of Hyrith, and I forget. There's one other singer from the
Euphemia Signia.
Yeah, God bless her. She's fabulous. What a voice.
Yeah.
And both of them just stunning. It's incredible to be in the company of these great artists. So, so I'm like, oh man, I better step up my game. I got to get on there. That's going to be exciting. Nullus, did you want to chime in a little bit, talk about your poem that you did for that song?
Well, I mean, I can speak about the poem itself. The poem was kind of a play on the lost generation of the post-World War I era with Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, who were many of whom were veterans of the First World War, and so they felt lost in the 20s and what have you. And I was trying to create a contemporary version of that by putting it in our lens, so to speak, of the vanishing generation, how a family evolves from an idyllic family harmony to eventually breaking down into what we're seeing today in our world almost everywhere around us. And that was kind of the impetus for the poem Vanishing Generation. So I wanted to sort of use that as a call to everyone that we should avoid becoming the vanishing generation. So it wasn't that I was saying that that's what we should become, just to avoid any misunderstanding. And so that was sort of the idea behind the poem itself. And just as a side note, I mean, I'm always honored when any one of you musicians take my poetry and put it to music. So for me, that's always an extremely uplifting experience. So I want to thank everyone who's ever taken my poetry up a notch, so to speak. So it's always nice to hear that.
Yeah, it's good to see more people doing it.
Yes. I think that's actually how Nullus and I connected, because I wrote a song based off of one of his poems, right. And I mean, we'll post all these links below as well. But it's just really cool. I think it says a lot about the White Art Collective and our community of people in the arts and the Dissident Right, is that we have a very there's a great amount of flow, I suppose. There's a lot of communication. We share our art, our pain, our laughter. We do fun things. Right now tonight they're recording a White Art Collective karaoke show. So it's not all, glum, dour, sour-faced people going, oh, white genocide, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of energy. It's maybe the opposite in some ways. We do, we recently kind of remembered Sky King, and I want to encourage people to look up Jack White's song on remembering Sky King and these sorts of things. So we're very much family, and it feels really good. And Nullus and I were having a discussion earlier about how Imperium Art, the Dissident Right, these various things. It's kind of a dangerous world out there for people who are speaking up for white identity politics. So, when you don't have millions of dollars and political backers and corporate sponsors and all the rest of that, we focus per se on just the health of our people, the enlightenment of our people, the growth of our people. And so I think it's just as important as court cases and good journalism and all the political dimensions as well. I just told Richard Spencer in a Twitter recently, this is as much a spiritual movement as it is a political one. So I'll get off my soapbox for a second here. I want to talk again with SYNTHICIDE about his relationship with the White Art Collective. How did you come into the White Art Collective?
Spot on, by the way. But I believe it was someone on Gab alerted, I think Jeff or Mama P, about the song that I just put out with Jason from No White Guilt. Kennard. And because that no, I had no contact with you guys until that point. So someone found just saw it, alerted White Art Collective, and that was the beginning of that. And as far as I know, it was from a Gab link.
I see. So how have they influenced your growth over the time that you've known them, the White Art Collective?
Well, naturally, it's always good to find a place where you can speak freely about your sort of, whether it's music, social, or political beliefs, without any ridiculous blowback from, people that are just too sensitive to talk about things normally. And simple as that. I just found it's like, and I've said this to Jeff before, it's like finding your tribe, like finally finding that place where you can peg into. And look, that's there's not a hell of a lot of synth wavers in the White Art Collective, and that's the point. There's so much different styles and influences in there, which is tremendous. So it's not just one sound coming out of there. Sure. And I think that's just great. And the collective aspect of it and collaborative nature of it is only going to make things grow better for us.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And I should also let the audience know that there's a DLive.tv. Help me out here, Nullus. It's the White Art Collective DLive channel. What is it? DLive.com/TV White Art Collective. Again, we'll have to post the link below. Nullus, did you have any questions for SYNTHICIDE regarding his recent work?
Well, I also like to know a little bit about what his musical influences were that led up to where he is today.
Okay. As far as electronically speaking, naturally, I've always, it's always difficult to sort of, I don't want to sort of waffle on too much, but I can obviously trace the lineage directly from disco through to neo-romanticism to new wave to house to techno to industrial to drum and bass. Do you want me to keep on going? Like you can if you can follow that line, you can see me stepping through the years up until where we are now, and I've been through all of that. So, I was mostly doing dubstep and drum and bass before this.
Nice.
And the reason I haven't stopped doing that, but it's just that it's so audio process intensive that I just got kind of sick of it after a while and just want to go back to just basic synthesizers not basic, but old school sort of sounds and look, it's easy for me to say because I grew up with that kind of stuff, but if I didn't, I'm sure I'd still be doing it. So, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the reason I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in. The reason I was asking, because the EP that you recently shared and published has a lot of, at least in my impression, had a lot of 80s influences, I felt.
Yeah.
A lot of new wave kind of influence there, and that's really what I was curious about.
Yeah, well, that was just, I suppose if I didn't do those collaborations with, you know, whether it was Euphemia or Peter,
Mm-hmm.
you know, those tracks obviously wouldn't sound the way they are, but always loved, you know, from Gary Newman to orchestral maneuvers in the dark, the early days of sort of, you know, British synth pop.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, one of the tracks with Euphemia sounds very Italo disco, so, you know, that's the Giorgio Moroder influence speaking to me directly there. So, yeah, they're probably two of my biggest influences would be Moroder and Carpenter. But, you know, that's I think that's pretty much stock standard for anyone that's in the synthwave game.
Yeah.
Even if they don't realize it.
Yeah. So my question for you as well, like we talk a lot about your music and your focus on your music, but I'm curious where you fall in the sort of the political spectrum on the far right. You know, we've got a lot of different people from, you know, Christians to Odinists to Brahmanists to this, that, and the other thing. There's many kind of sort of political zones, I guess, if you will. And I haven't really heard you talk much about your, you know, like people who you look up to or that you follow on Twitter or anywhere, you know, books you've read or philosophers that you're interested in. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your kind of political orientation?
Okay, well, you know, I'd probably, if I look over the arc of my sort of journey to where I am now, you know, I'd probably have to say earlier on, without even thinking about it, probably a default leftist. But having said that, I was always of the opinion that left wing, and right wing, it just didn't mean anything to me because I could already see the bullshit between just having to choose between two parties from, well, as soon as I could vote, really.
Yeah.
But my sort of, I suppose, awakening to the inner machinations of, you know, politics and global politics came from, well, I'm sure you guys remember the name Bill Cooper. William Cooper. He was shot not too long after 9/11, but he put out the book Behold a Pale Horse.
Yes, very famous guy. Yeah. There's still a lot of lectures from him online that people can find. They're very powerful.
Exactly. Yeah, he pretty much spurred on Alex Jones, but also turned against him in the end. But
he doesn't get enough attention, actually.
Yeah, no, it's quite incredible writing. Now,
he was talking about this stuff before anybody was even aware of it. He's definitely
exactly.
You know, right? Spilled the beans.
Yeah, and we had another guy out here in Australia by the name of Jeremy Lee, who has also since passed on, but he was connected to a group out of Queensland called the League of Rights, and it came from a very, very similar perspective to Cooper, but not in a conspiratorial way. He just put it up with evidence-based documents, whether it was from charters from, you know, all the usual sort of names like IMF, the UN, all that kind of stuff, and just what the world would be going into over the next 10 years, 20 years, whatever. This is from the early 90s, by the way. Yeah. And, you know, most people, you play that kind of stuff and it's like, you know, get real. Like, you're an idiot believing in this. Yet everything that was pointed out in these videos came to pass. So it's like, okay. And it's nothing, it really is nothing conspiratorial. It's just simply how politics and business merge to form what became the New World Order which is, I hate saying that term because it's become such a
I know.
loaded shit term.
But
that
it's kind of what it is, though. I mean, they
yeah,
go on.
it became, the 90s and until 9/11. It's pretty much a unipolar world, with you had America and the Middle East, and the story. But things are changing, and it's we've got to hold on for the ride. But
I'm sorry. This leads me to my next question. I don't think that most people are really aware of the Australian experience of being in the Dissident Right. And, we would really love it if you could kind of wake us up a bit and give us a sense of what it's like to walk in your shoes. What is the Australian experience in the political climate that you're in now?
Yeah, it's there's not a lot happening here, as far as movement wise. They've all seemed to sort of died off over the last, as far as in real life kind of organizations. We had a couple of groups. Usually, you guys have heard of Blair Cottrell?
No, that's what I'm saying. What's going on in Australia is off my radar, so it's kind of hoping.
Okay. Well, I actually used one of his speeches in one of the tracks on the latest album as well. So check that one out. But there were some groups around there, just patriotic sort of groups. They had a run for a few years, but most of them, at least from from 2015 onwards, as you can imagine, were all geared towards anti-Islam kind of stances. And look, that's typical of pretty much everything when you look, 5 years back. Gradually, people kind of drop that and get a bit more red-pilled on other issues. But now it just all seems to fade.
How big a presence of, like, say, Antifa do you have, or how much influence does feminism have in Australia?
It's the same within states. It's just in university level indoctrination. We have our own versions of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, of course. Here it's been anything that you can think of in the States or the UK is fortunately or unfortunately mirrored here, to some extent.
All the same flavor of globo homo, basically, in all Western.
Yeah, exactly. But having said that, the movements are never as well, probably not as bigger. But then, you look back to the days of the rallies against the World Trade Organization things in the early 2000s. We had that same thing here. I took a couple of days off work to go to it. Rage Against the Machine, all this sort of crap. It's like, looking back on it, it's just like, what were we thinking? Nothing. We're going to change absolutely nothing.
Right.
But that was our original S11 in 2000. Then all of a sudden, the year later, that term wasn't used anymore.
Yeah, I've never believed that shouting in the streets accomplishes anything other than puts you in harm's way and gets you on somebody's camera. There's got to be better ways. But Nullus, did you have any thoughts or questions on this topic?
No, I find it very fascinating. So I'm just listening to the experience in Australia and how similar it is in many respects.
So that in itself is a lesson, a takeaway.
We're pretty much, obviously we were British, sort of raised on the British system, but we've had the American influence very strongly since, after World War II. We've got a very big secret American army base in the middle of Australia that not many people realise. But you haven't heard of that one, I guess. But
no.
Well, I can't go there, and neither can you. So it's just
sure.
Yeah, but it's strategic.
Well, maybe I can ask, how popular is Mel Gibson in Australia right now?
He's always going to be popular here. But it was actually meant to come out here for a speaking tour. It's like a stand-up tour.
Wow.
And then the shutdown happened. Yes, I would have gone to it for sure. But the Mad Max connection.
It'll be interesting when his movie on is it the Rothschilds?
That's
That's
right.
coming
Yeah.
out. That I mean, boy oh boy, I can't wait for that. But earlier you mentioned we have we're influenced by America. I need to understand more clearly what that means, because when I generally take that to mean American movies. And I think, obviously the Jews control Hollywood, so you got to wonder, is it American influence or is it Jewish influence? So could you maybe
Right.
expand on that topic a little bit?
Okay. Well, we're definitely, being where we are, as far as pop culture, we get as much British as much, well, maybe not equally now, but it was sort of, for a while, it was as much British and American and Canadian, whether it came down to music or any other kind of pop culture.
I see.
But as far as politically, we also have to deal, because of where Australia is in the world. We have huge. Well, actually, so does America, but where we are particularly, we're in line with China, and and that's just the way it is. And they're our biggest trading partner, and they're going like gangbusters all across the world, and I flip flop on whether that's a good or bad thing all the time, because I can sort of see both points. But as far as the cultural aspect of the tribe's influence in pop culture, obviously I was never really awoken to that for a long time. But
well,
we see it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, we're all able to usually recognize subversion, but I think it's with Netflix, I notice it even more and more. It's worse than ever with streaming, things like that.
Yeah,
so
HBO, Netflix, Hulu. Oh man, it's just full on anti-white propaganda. It's just pure evil.
Yeah, it's explicit now.
That's what's insane about it. I can't see how whites cannot see how much we're hated and hunted and disenfranchised. It's just so in your face now. So I wanted to kind of change the direction. The first half of the show, we usually introduce our guests, let people get to know you, etc. But then we want to talk more about Imperium Art, and that's obviously the theme of the show. So, I know you've been aware of what we've been doing on this show for a while. I was wondering if you could just give us your impressions of what Imperium Art is, what you feel about it.
Yeah, sure. As far as I think as far as being in the Imperium Art analogy, I think suits. Do I fit into it? Well, yeah, sure. As far as being an art movement in itself, I'm not too sure how far the brackets should go. Obviously, at this point, because of course there's much room for diversity. But often a lot of art movements, can become elitist in nature, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because you're talking to an elitist here. So,
Nullus has a question
to an extent,
topic, actually.
Right? Okay.
Nullus, you want to jump in?
Sure.
Exclusive versus inclusive.
Yeah, we've had this theme. It's sort of a running theme with Imperium Art. And the theme is essentially, should Imperium Art be more inclusive or more exclusive? So in other words, should it be more discriminating in defining what belongs to Imperium Art? Or should we just simply say all Dissident Right music should be a part, or let me rephrase that, all Dissident Right art should be a part of Imperium Art by default? So what's your take on that?
Ooh. I was going to say yes, but to an extent, I think that we just have to sort of consider where the line is. Obviously, the line, for anyone would be intentional, subversion or intentionally trying to appeal to unwanted elements outside the sphere. But I mean, take for example, you can go on, SoundCloud, for example, and find myriad of Dissident Right, Synthwave or Fashwave artists, and I think at the end of the day, they're still, their virtues still coming from our sphere, clearly, whether it's through more of a divine aspect or more of an intentional sort of imperial, kind of fashy aspect. I think that they're all, due for inclusion. Although they're not in the White Art Collective yet, most of them, but I do think that there is room for more. I've actually been intending to reach out to a lot more of them because I've been making a list of people to contact and see what they're up to, because just some of them have been rather quiet over recent sort of, like, for example, Eternal Reich disappeared about a year ago. I have no idea why, but so that's my take.
It would be helpful to have some kind of a platform or community for people like that, to come back into the fold, have support, have an audience, have the White Art Collective is a platform. We wouldn't say that it's a movement per se. The movement is kind of a big word, and we're still grappling with that, in the sense that, we're asking people to come on the show and discuss the arts in the dissident right and white identity politics. And it's a movement without a title. So I came up with the term Imperium Art, and then, thus the show, here we are. So, but yeah, so my point I'm making is I'm responding to what you're saying, in that people who are outside of, say, the White Art Collective, or not aware of Imperium Art, like people doing Fashwave, for example, it would be, we're inviting them to come in and to kind of come back, per se, and to contribute and be a part of this. You know what I'm saying? Nullus, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the purpose of the White Art Collective. It's also the purpose of Imperium Art. The White Art Collective is the home, if you want to put it in a if you want to give it a nice description, it's the home of dissident right artists. But Imperium Art provides a context. It provides a contextualization of their art, so it helps them define themselves within this whole. And I think that's where what we're trying to figure out, at least with Imperium Art, is how can we provide help. In other words, and this is this ongoing conversation, right, about inclusivity, exclusivity, whether or not Imperium Art should be more of a high art kind of movement, or whether or not it should be a fully inclusive movement. And, again, there are pros and cons to each one of these arguments. But I think at the end of the day, the idea of Imperium Art is to help artists get a conceptualization, a contextualization, help them, provide them with some kind of reason why they're doing what they're doing outside of the raw emotional aspect of it. And I think that's really what we're trying to work on with Imperium Art. And again, I would also urge artists all over the place that are interested to join the White Art Collective. It's a wonderful community, and I think it's a really good stepping stone to finding more about yourself in a way. And I hope at least that Imperium Art will be able to provide additional help in more contextualization.
I want to add to that what we're doing with Imperium Art is very much an exact mirror image of the far right and white identity politics. In that we are the white identity, let's say the far right, the dissident right, the alt right, is a name for a part of the right wing where people are totally woke to what's going on with white genocide, etc., and who's causing it, etc., etc. And we're seeking, and other people who are aware of it but are not aware of us. And so, you know, we're constantly kind of reaching out to the normie right or other people and saying, "Hey, come home, you know, come home. This is this is a racial awakening movement for whites globally in the Western world. It's like a Western civilization reawakening in some kind." And so, the arts, you know, has to have a name. You know, the movement, or rather the political movement that used to be called the alt-right, somebody came up with that name and that solidified it. Well, we've come up with the name Imperium Art, and it's so because we say it so, and that means the artist defines the art. You know, we don't let the left define our terms, which is what they always try to do. And so we're kind of, you know, blocking that and punching back, so to speak, saying, no, we're intercepting your subversion and we're naming our own identity, our own trajectory in the arts. And the arts obviously is reflecting the movement of white political identity. So that's it's a big mouthful. That's a lot to think about, but it's also very beautiful.
I like
and very
that.
profound. I'm sorry?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. It's a great concept. I think it's fair to say that if any artist, no matter what they do, is coming from, whether it's the spiritual or divine with a forward-looking sort of focus on Western kind and or European aspect, I think that they can pretty much be included in that. Within certain guidelines.
You know, this leads me to my next question, which is about, that was sort of the bird's eye view, or like looking at the whole puzzle, and then what is your piece of the puzzle? How does Synthicide fit in with Imperium Art, or play a role in white art, rather in white identity politics?
Oh, right, okay, yeah, I guess I just did kind of answer that in a way. Yeah, it's as far as the spiritual and divine. I come at that from my perspective, probably more of a pre-Christian, going back to, look, I didn't grow up religious, so neo-pagan or whatever, but to me, I approach my music from a nature is divine, or is the divine aspect. Hence, especially a lot of my dreamy stuff, like it's coming directly from there.
Beautiful.
Then whereas the heavier aspect, I suppose more the fash aspect, that's my pro-Western kind European stance. So that's where I kind of fit in. Now, obviously I didn't used to make music consciously from that manner, or, well, maybe subconsciously. But now it is very much conscious, so therefore I am. That's as simple as that.
Beautiful.
Actually, I have a follow-up question to that, which is another topic an ongoing topic that we have. Do you think that there is room for music that might subconsciously be, let's just say, pro-European, pro-Western, pro-white? But it's not explicitly so, or the artist might not have actually had this conscious motivation. Do you think that any of that kind of music would fit into Imperium Art?
I do, actually, and I'm glad you asked that, because it reminded me of something. Now, within the big synthwave umbrella, especially maybe thanks to the Trump election, it did sort of shoot out some dividing lines, and I noticed them instantly, because you could just see how people were talking. Certain people would get sort of dog piled on online, or and basically I came to realize that a lot of the original guys that kind of kicked off the synthwave thing don't engage on any subject politically or socially, and then there's a reason for that, because they obviously don't want to be tainted with a brush. But at the end of the day, I can, and it joys me much to say this, that most of them are actually, most of them are subconsciously in our sphere, but there are also a large percentage that are consciously in our sphere, out about it in their music. And, you know, I'm not, obviously I don't need to name names, but if anyone knows all the sort of major players from over the last sort of 10 years, the answer is yes. And but now, would they want to be included in our sphere? Obviously, the majority would rather say no thanks. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't want to taint the music with any kind of socio-political rush. And then that's fair enough. I can understand that, but you know, it's you know, look, there's those of us that just wish to sort of poke the bear a little bit, and yeah, there's room for both. I think that it would be good to maybe include some, like you said, Nullus, that are subconsciously on our side without realizing it,
Right.
because, you know, you're only going to sort of maybe help expose them to other things and bring them further over to our side. You know, maybe get off the fence.
Well, that's the big challenge, I think, where there's a lot of stigmas attached to certain phrases, certain concepts, and certain ideas. And I think that you know, people like No White Guilt, for example, do an excellent job in providing an alternative phraseology to that. With that said, though, the biggest problem and the biggest obstacle I see with people that might subconsciously be sympathetic but are not willing to take that next step is the fear. It's mainly driven by fear, and maybe not even the social acceptance, the fear of social or the peer pressure, as much as it is the fear of looking in the mirror and finding what you see. And I think that a lot, at least that's more and more, that's starting to become my realization in terms of what I see with people that are outside the explicit fear, the explicit sphere of the dissident right. People who might be implicitly sympathetic, or who might be implicitly supporting these endeavors that we are trying to achieve, but they just don't want to express it openly. And a lot of times I think that they're all worried about being called a racist, for example. So that's like that scarlet letter, that big R that'll be, you know, tattooed on their forehead. And they don't want that, and they're afraid of that because it's been ingrained and brainwashed in their consciousness that this is an evil that they have to avoid. And of course, you know, you see this in every aspect of our postmodern culture, where these certain terms and phrases are being used against us and keeping people from actually realizing that it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be unapologetically who you are, and it's okay to be proud of your heritage. So I think that maybe us as artists, we have to be cognizant of this fact that other people just they're not there yet, or they might never actually cross over, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that they're unsympathetic. And I think that us as in our art, we also have to provide room for that, so that we can tell them that you have a home, the door is always open. And I think that may be the best way to put it, in a sense.
That segues beautifully into my last question, which is something we all kind of discussed offline to say, you know, what should this show be about? And the question was, what advice do you have for musicians trying to make Imperium art, or music that reflects the experience of white identity politics? What are your thoughts?
Okay. So we're talking consciously or subconsciously?
Let's start consciously.
Yeah, consciously. Well, okay. Well, after all the recent, all that BLM bullshit, it created a lot more civnats. At least people that I knew of musically, all of a sudden announced, I could see where their thoughts were going. Now,
kind of
at a civnat level, exactly, or at least pro-American or patriotic to some extent, which is better than nothing at the end of the day. And now, is there room for them? Of course. Now, like you said, we have to sort of tread carefully because, someone like that, if they're all of a sudden in this sphere and maybe come across a few viewpoints that they find a little bit too much to deal with, well, we know what reaction some of them might have, and that might end up hurting us in the long run. So
they're still playing the "I'm not a racist" game. They're still on the strings of the leftists. They're like virtue signaling to the left rather than like coming home to us. But go on.
Yeah. So as far as and we could always sort of say that that synthwave, which is commonly sort of thought of as harks back to a better time in sort of world politics for Western kind. That seems to be a common sort of feeling. So maybe in some respects, a lot of synthwave producers doing that music are subconsciously doing it. So, but as far as getting them to cross over into explicitly producing music for Western kind, for themselves as well, I think it's a matter of socializing them into our sphere, because people only need to sort of be around there for so long and realize that it's, we aren't the bad guys.
So you're saying community is a key component to their growth development, both kind of just as people, but also as artists. So this once again, let's do, hats off to Jeff Winston for creating the White Art Collective, and to all the members of the White Art Collective for being that community. And we're all very
hats off.
Yeah, hats off to them.
I just took off my fedora.
That's a good. Fedora's off to Lord Wolfshield as well. But anyway, you're making a beautiful point, and actually, I'm surprised I didn't think about that. I'm very sort of independent, but we're social animals. If you're going to be ousted from one community, where are you going to go? And that's kind of why we keep saying, "Come home." Come home to us. Come home to Western. Yeah, that's beautifully done.
Yeah, there's some people I'm working on. So
good. I'm always working on a lot of people actually, but
my whole take on that is if you can convince one person, just one person, that's already a success. So I think that if we all collectively can say that if we can all convert one person, then now we've doubled our numbers. I mean, and so I think that we have to also be realistic about our goals in a way, by saying maybe we can't change the world tomorrow, but we can change one person tomorrow. And then the day after tomorrow, it continues and grows from there. And I think that if we take that approach, a more pragmatic, realistic approach, I think that we will achieve more success.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And the arts do it so well, rather than having a kind of an argument on Facebook or something like that. If you share these kinds of arts with people, in a sense, it approaches them through their senses, through their emotions. And I think there's so many people out there that know something's wrong, but they're trapped in their social world and don't have a way out. So like if we can kind of get our music and art out more, beyond our own sphere, and more into the normie right or beyond that, then I think we could. It's sort of like a beacon in the night. It's a kind of a sort of a signal to those in the dark. Come this way, join us again. So that's beautifully done. Well, any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
I haven't really got any, other than that, as far as finding other, I suppose, synthwave artists that are in our sphere, I would recommend that the easiest place to sort of find other artists would probably be from SoundCloud, and you've just got to either follow myself or Zerius on there, and you will find everyone else. And there is a lot, and and I'm working on contacting as many of them as I possibly can to see who's still active. But yeah, it's just a matter of, and as far as all the what want to say, apolitical artists.
Yeah.
I think that we could all, whether it's through Twitter or wherever it might be, there's some that I'm still working on. Some have shown to sort of, even with people that I collaborated with on my latest album, it's kind of like some of them definitely aren't into what we're doing, and say that they don't have a problem with being connected to it. But I do suggest that people maybe just do a little bit more homework first before they bring people any deeper into the sphere.
Yeah.
Because I may have averted some catastrophes by doing that.
Yeah, I certainly have myself.
Yeah.
It is tricky. I think I'm a former art teacher, and you always go to where the level of where someone is as a teacher. So we in the Dissident Right have to do the same. We have to have the sense that, if you just go both guns blazing into a situation, you could do more damage than good. And you have to sort of find out where is somebody at, and then kind of leave a trail of popcorn to pull them out a little bit, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more, And something to remember, people will always remember how you made them feel instead of what you said, what you told them.
Good point.
Yeah, and I mean, you can have all the facts and drop all the names in the world, but if you didn't make them feel at home and comfortable and kind of healing in some way, or a sense of pride in being a part of Western kind, then you didn't succeed. That's just kind of how people are. So there's that.
I just wanted to add a very simple point that I can only speak for myself, because all the artists in the White Art Collective, and in fact, a lot of artists that are on the Dissident Right that are not in the White Art Collective, there's a lot of great talent out there, and so I'm always inspired by them, and I never judge myself, and I seek not to judge myself in terms of my contribution. But what I do hope is that I can inspire others to create. I can inspire others to think for themselves. And hopefully someone who's 10 times more talented than I am, can create something marvelous. And I think that's really the hope that I always have with what I'm doing.
Well done. Beautifully done. Well, nice. SYNTHICIDE, we thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
we, of course, have links below, and I believe Nullus is going to edit some music into this show. So, yes. Please, everyone in the audience, share. Subscribe, get this word out into your networks, and let's grow, let's be stronger, and we can do it together. So let's do it. All right, guys, have a wonderful night, and thank you so much for joining us on Imperium Art.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. And also, I might announce this actually. I'm not too sure when, but look out for the theme music for EBL sometime soon.
Wonderful.
It's a nice little peanut I'll throw out there.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yes, that's going to be on hopefully shortly in the near future, but we're not going to give it a date, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's in the works. Many things in the works. Always.
Excellent.
So stay tuned for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks again. Good night.
Good night.
guys.
Thank you, everybody.